Hi guys, Totallydubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Grado GS3000e. Now these open back flagship headphones can be found for around £1,800 to £1,600, and in the US they're around $1,800. Now these headphones compete in the top tier type of headphones, at least for dynamic or planar magnetic headphones. If you're interested in some of the alternatives, do check them out again in the description below. There'll be ones from Sennheiser, Odyssey, and even from the likes of the Imutique. Now, before jumping into this review, if you do have Instagram, I'd very much appreciate a follow. It's at TotallyDubbed. And if you're interested in all electric or hybrid vehicles, do check out TotallyEV. Your support would be very much appreciated. So, without further ado, let's see how these Grado headphones actually sound. So first off, let's talk about, well, what you get in the box. Well, I don't have a retail package because this was a press sample, but all I will say is that the headphones come with and are terminated by a 6.3mm jack. And they come with an adapter from a 6.3 to a 3.5mm jack, and there's also an extender cable which is larger than the 1.8 cable that you've got here, and it goes from 6.3 to 6.3, so it's a female to male connector, just as an FYI as to what you get. Now, in terms of the headphones, let's talk about their design and build quality. The headphones themselves have got these Kokombolo housing, at least that's I think how you say it. These wooden enclosure are absolutely stunning to look at. If you look at that finish, it's just really beautifully done. And I think what Grado have done over here is just, well, should be commended in terms of the wood design. Now, the same couldn't really be said about the other aspects of the headphone because, well, let's break it down. First off, the headband design. Now the headband design is on this kind of, not kind of suspender, but it's got this up and down element of it. For people who have Grado headphones, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and they can be, well, they can tilt around all the way 360 degrees. Now this is great in terms of adjustability, but in terms of longevity, I don't think this is a good design because this will just kind of wear out, and at which point this will then become loose. It even does feel it that way when you come to the lower segments of the headphone. So either this has been very heavily used by other reviewers, or the fact that its hinge design over here is just, well, giving way for a flagship headphone. Now there's an all leather headband, which is nice, but there's no suspender design, and the headband itself has pretty much got next to nothing in terms of padding at the top, which means that if you're going to be using these for a long period of time, they will feel like they're digging in. Again, not to be expected from a flagship headphone. As for left and right indicator, it's pretty obvious, it's over here. Other than that, there's no left and right indicator within the cup or within the inner part of the headband. But I don't think most people will be worried about that because these indicators are pretty clear. Now, in terms of the cable, I've got a real issue with it because it's really, really heavy. Now the headphone as a total weighs around 450 grams. I mean, I actually had to get my kitchen scale thing out. I know, very scientific. And I had to measure the cable. And the reason why is because the headphones themselves don't feel too heavy. They're around 250 to 300 grams, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you can see over there, around that. Now, if I were to add this cable on its own and put this into shot, what you will see is that the cable themselves weigh around 200 grams, around that region. You can see it's not exactly accurate because how I'm holding them and everything like that. Now in comparison, all of its competitors have either much thinner cables or cables that can be removed. And unfortunately, this cable cannot be removed in the slightest, which means that you're left with this really heavy cable. Now what I found myself is that when I was sitting at my desk and listening to my music and gaming, what I found is the cable just was actually annoying me. I had to place some of the cable on my lap so that it would take some of the strain off my head. And given the fact that the headphones design, it meant that this kind of thing was kind of pulling on my head entirely, almost all the time when I was using it. So its cable design is not the greatest, but Grado could have solved this if they had removable cables, and they don't. So it's just really bad thinking. In my opinion, for flagship headphones, there's no excuse. If I bring in, let's say, the Imutiques over here, the removable variants, you can see these have got removable cables and they can be removed for your liking and can be changed. And not only is this cable much thinner, but it's just a lot more practical. So I just really don't like what Grado have done over here with the design of the cable. The same could be said about the inner cup. Now the inner cup design, some people will like this given the fact that they're fully adjustable, but in my case, due to the diameter and the way that it's designed, my top of my ear was being pressed against the driver, and that doesn't lead to a comfortable experience, specifically if you're going to be listening to these headphones for a long period of time like I was. Now these pads can be removed entirely, so you can change them if you so wish, but again, for a set of flagship headphones, I was not expecting to feel uncomfortable in the slightest, from the top of the headband to the cable or even to the ear cups. So while the look of the headphones is, well, truly stunning in my opinion, I think that the rest of the build quality and design of the headphones is just not really well thought out. And now we get onto sound quality. Now first off, in terms of my setup, these headphones were connected over to my Grado GS3000e DAC, then over to my PC, and at which point they were playing back low quality, high quality music, and I was also using these as a daily driver for around a month, playing back movies, watching YouTube videos, and furthermore gaming. Now let's break it down in terms of the sound frequencies. First off, let's talk about the sub bass. Now these headphones, given their open back nature, weren't to compete with closed back headphones, and very much so when I did put these headphones on and listen to them, that was no surprise to see that these headphones just don't give you that meat and that low end extension that you come across to hear with closed back headphones. Be it budget, as in £500 to £400 closed back headphones, to flagship closed back headphones, which are like the Fostex TH900s. So in this respect, the sub bass just wasn't as prominent. It is present, and therefore in comparison to, let's say, the Sennheiser HD 800S, it will sound, well, just a little bit more prominent in this department. As for the mid bass, I was actually pretty disappointed. Here the GS3000e just doesn't have a precise, concise type of sound. Instead, it sounded a bit wobbly, which isn't something I would expect to say for a set of flagship headphones. Granted, if these headphones were about £200 to £300 or /dollars, then I'd be perfectly happy with them. But at this price range, there's really no excuse. Moving on from the mid bass, we've got the mids. Here, these open back headphones were truly made to shine, because the mids should really come out better in comparison to, let's say, closed back headphones. Unfortunately, these Grado headphones have got very much the Grado sound signature, and therefore it's a little bit pushed back and recessed and kind of warm sounding. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but for open back headphones at this price range, its alternatives just do a far better job. Now here I would say they compete somewhat similar to the Audeze line, or even, let's say, the Hi-Fi Man line, which are a little bit, recessed and warm sounding. If you want more accurate vocals and you want a headphone that really comes across much better in the mid-range, then you should really look into the Sennheiser line, because they're just far superior in this domain in comparison to the Grado headphones. As for the highs, these headphones do have a little bit of roll-off at the top end. It's very, very slight and very hard to hear, but there's that slight little bit of roll-off. And here, in comparison to, well, pretty much all of its competitors, which kind of extend, I would say that these headphones just sound a little bit more, well, a little bit rounded off, which is not something, again, that I'd expect to say about flagship headphones. Nevertheless, the highs are not harsh or sibilant, and therefore will be fine for longer listening sessions, so you won't have any issues in terms of that, and even if you were to crank them at a louder volume. Now the Soundstage is here what really disappointed me of all the sort of sound quality traits of the GS3000e. Purely because these open back headphones were supposed to give you a really open and airy sound. Instead, that's not really the case that you get. In fact, they're somewhat kind of semi-open back sounding. It sounds a weird principle, but they don't have that width and depth of, let's say, the Sennheiser 800S, and yet they don't sound as closed and claustrophobic, in relative terms, in comparison to, let's say, the Fostex TH900 or even my Imutiques. So here, the Grado headphones sit on somewhat of a odd ground. They just don't come across as open and airy as they should do for open back headphones, and yet they don't sound as close sounding as they should do, or they would have done if they had closed back headphones design in comparison to, well, closed back headphones. So it's somewhat of a middle ground, and personally I think this should have been just far better addressed. Now, even with width and depth taken out the equation, let's talk about the instrument separation. Because the instrument separation is there, but due to it sounding a little bit more closed than it should do for open back headphones, the instrument separation just doesn't come across as well. As for closed back headphones in this domain, which have that kind of chamber where that music is kind of resonating from, these headphones don't have that. and therefore the instrument separation just doesn't come across as well as it should do. Again, all things considered, if these were much cheaper headphones, I wouldn't have an issue. But if they are flagship headphones, which these are, then it just somewhat left me disappointed. On the whole, what I'm trying to say over here is that while the sound quality is very Grado-like, in other words, you've got this rocky type of sound signature, it just doesn't compete in comparison to the other flagship headphones that you can buy. For the amount of money that you're spending on these Grado headphones, you could buy several other good headphones and still have change, or buy a set of, let's say, HD 800S, buy yourself a great DAC, and still potentially still have change in comparison to the Grado GS3000e. So I think what Grado have tried to achieve over here is basically trying getting a more forward sounding mid-range, open back sound in comparison to its cheaper alternatives that Grado offers. But this scaling up kind of project, at least this is what it seems in my opinion, just hasn't come across great. And from what you can get elsewhere, I just can't see myself ever recommending them. I just can't see why someone would want them. Now, sound quality aside, they're not exactly perfect in terms of their design. They're really, really thick cable. It's just, well, lugs around all over the place. And they're non-removable, which is kind of silly, because if people want to remove the cables and want to replace them and further down the line, specifically let's say if they snag or break, and I think it will be very, very hard to break this type of cable, but you never know. And for a flagship headphone not to have removable cables is simply, well, it can't be excused. And as for the design, as I mentioned before, the ear cup design and even the way that they're formed, it's just not exactly premium feeling. And the fact that it gave me a little bit of discomfort at the top of my ears wasn't a great sign either. So on the whole, all I'm trying to say over here is that I just wasn't impressed, and they're not headphones that I would recommend, and can't see myself seeing why someone would go out and jump and buy these when there's a lot of alternatives to consider out there. But that's my opinion, that's my subjective opinion. Let me know in the comments below if these are headphones that you would buy, or there are other headphones that you would buy instead. I'd be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts. Now, if you like this type of independent, unbiased content, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course, favorite and share, as it always helps the channel grow. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care, and goodbye.